think I am having a panic attack.
First time.
A bit of a disclaimer up front here. This is like my first time reviewing something. So if my arguments or points come off as very vague or anything, then feel free to put them out in the comments down below. DreamWorks Animation has always been an interesting studio to analyze. While the quality of Pixar and Disney films for the majority of their existence has been mostly consistent, I said mostly, DreamWorks is a studio of many peaks and valleys. For every Kung Fu Panda, How to Train Your Dragon, or Prince of Egypt, you get a Boss Baby, or Trolls, or a Peabody and Mr. Sherman. And while DreamWorks' lack of straight consistency does make them admirable, at the same time it also makes them frustrating to many people. When you watch a DreamWorks film, you never know what you're really going to be getting. So with that out of the way, how does Ruby Gillman fit into all of this? Where does it rank among the pantheon of DreamWorks' animated lineup? Okay, before I rip into this film, let's state the positives first. The animation and general look of the film is pretty great. I love the design of the town of Oceanside and its architecture, and how it kind of all looks like those little McDonald's play gyms. The character animation is also really solid. The way Ruby and her Kraken family moves on land, bending and twisting their bodies cause they're invertebrates, was a very clever choice from the animation team. And when Ruby and the other Krakens go underwater to turn into giant Krakens, the bioluminescence on their body is just so beautiful. Deadass and Echo the Dolphin style game where you play as Ruby and her Kraken form would be pretty sick, not gonna lie. Some of the casts were also pretty entertaining, with Ruby's family being a personal highlight for me, and how there's actually some decent chemistry between all of them. Special shout out goes to Ruby's mother, Agatha. There's this one scene where Ruby first transforms into a giant Kraken and can't change back. So her mother decides to find her and calm her down, and it ends up being a really touching scene. Easily one of the best scenes of the movie. Oh yeah, there's also this Moby Dick guy, who I'll admit was pretty entertaining for what he was. Though I do wish he interacted with Ruby a lot more, as he's basically the only person in the entire town who's suspicious about the Gillmans. And yes, despite them all having blue skin, different ears, and a bunch of other stuff, all they have to say is they're from Canada to get people off their back. What is this, Invader Zim? I actually never watched Invader Zim, so I don't know if that's accurate or not. The musical score was also pretty nice. Though most of the OST didn't stick out to me, it was at least nice to listen to. Which I could say the same for the crap ton of pop songs that are in this movie. Of course, it's a DreamWorks film, so it has to have licensed music. And it plays a lot. Like, distractingly so. I don't get it, I think the movie would have been fine with just original music. Also, I gotta give credit to the voice cast. They all did a pretty good job with what they had to work with. But also I gotta give credit to DreamWorks for not shilling the celebrity names during the trailers. It's a trend that not only them but most other animation studios are doing, and I hope it continues. Selling these movies on the premise and what they're truly about, instead of just flashing celebrity names and expecting people to care. Though with how this movie is currently doing at the box office, that could have potentially come in handy, I don't know. And yeah, that's it. That's all the positives I got. Okay, it's time to tear this movie apart. While I did praise the animation, it was, at times, a bit too manic for my liking. Though the only time that really got on my nerves was whenever Ruby's friend Margot was on screen. She is so animated, for lack of a better word. Like, Jesus girl, calm down. Speaking of Ruby's friends, yeah, she has them. And I can barely remember any of their names. And that's a case for most of the side characters in this movie. A lot of them just didn't leave that much of an impression on me. Like, did you know that Margot girl was studying to become a clown? No. Well, I don't blame you, because it's only brought up twice in the entire damn film. Or how about Connor?
Are you afraid to die, Connor?
Ruby's love interest, because yes, it's a high school movie and we have to have a love interest. Can you really tell me anything about his character besides him being Ruby's eye candy and him liking math? My point still stands. Also, yeah, Ruby likes math. She even has like a catchphrase for it that I can't remember, so that's a thing. And to go back to the animation, while I like Ruby and her family's designs, but then you look at the humans and it's just like,
oh my god, what's wrong with your face?
Like, bro, look at how small his head is, and look at how big his arms are. Am I not the only one who noticed this? But none of that stuff compares to the biggest problem I have with this movie, and yes, you all saw it coming. It's how painfully paint-by-numbers the story is, and the movie as a whole. Also the pacing. The pacing is pretty bad here. While not absolutely true of every scene, most of them feel like they go by way too quickly. People complained about the Mario movie being way too fast. Bro, Ruby Gillman steps in and says, "Hold my beer." So much stuff goes by way too fast that you can't process any of it, or even let things sit. This movie needed to be at least 10 or 15 minutes longer so that the entire experience doesn't feel rushed. Let me bring up some examples. So near the end of the first act, Ruby goes searching for her long-lost grandmother to try and find the truth about her past. And when she does meet her grandmother, she reveals that the Gillman family actually heirs from royalty, and that Ruby herself is actually a princess. Which leads to another scene where she gets to meet the people of the Kraken Empire. Now, why do I bring all this stuff up? Well, it's because a lot of this stuff is only brought up once and never really touched on again. After this introductory scene, we don't really see the Kraken people at all throughout the rest of the movie. And Ruby being a princess isn't touched on much either, at least as far as I can remember. And then there's this weird thing Agatha brings up when she confronts her mother. Now, for those who haven't watched the movie, Agatha has a pretty strained relationship with her mother. And it's revealed in said confrontation that the reason Agatha left her royal position and came to the human world was because Grandmama was obsessed with fighting. Which is an interesting point because I didn't bring this up yet, but Grandmama starts off the movie by saying Krakens aren't actually evil, but noble, benevolent creatures. But what I find interesting is how she characterizes other sea monsters, basically casting them all off as evil creatures, with mermaids being the most evil and having no redeeming qualities about them.
The most power-hungry and dangerous creature of all.
The mermaid?
Yes, the mermaid! Ugh.
If you watch the trailers, you know about this. It makes her come off as a little bit vain and even bloodthirsty, which makes that line of Agatha saying how she only wants to fight all the time more interesting.
I fight for my family. I fight for who I love. You just want to fight!
That guy's terrifying. Can I live with a warlord?
But unfortunately, as soon as that interesting point is brought up, it is immediately dropped and never touched on again. You know what? To end this off, let's talk about Chelsea. So if you watched any of the trailers, you know that Chelsea is a bad guy. The marketing does not hold its tongue to let you know that.
Lovely, charming, and peaceful creatures. Unfortunately, those stories are very, very wrong. This is the true face of a mermaid. Vicious claws, her pointy fins, teeth that bite harder than a great white shark.
But when I see Chelsea, all I see is just missed potential. Let me explain. So there's a scene, which you can easily find on YouTube, where Ruby asks Chelsea for guidance in how to fit in with other humans. This piggybacks off a previous scene where Chelsea saves Ruby's life while also revealing that she herself is a mermaid. Chelsea then tells Ruby to embrace her true Kraken self and stop trying so hard to be human. This leads to a montage of them hanging out together, trying to be best friends. After said montage, Chelsea reveals that after the War of the Trident, all the mermaids went into hiding. Said war was fought between the mermaids and the Krakens ended up winning. Both Ruby and Chelsea agree that this generational war is pretty BS, and craft a plan to steal the Trident of Oceanus and unite the kingdoms together. But spoiler alert, Chelsea betrays Ruby and then it leads to the whole third act fight you see in the trailers and all that jazz. And this feels like such a missed opportunity for a cool plot point. What if, let's say, Chelsea wasn't completely bullshitting to Ruby's face and actually wanted to use the Trident to unite all the races? But when Grandmama finds out about this and sees Chelsea with the Trident, Grandmama attacks Chelsea due to her years of mermaid hatred and just assumes the worst from all mermaids, forcing Chelsea to go on the defense and turn into her evil mermaid form. You could then have Chelsea go on some emotional spiel about how she feels betrayed and how she thought everything was going to turn out fine and all that jazz. Now I think this change to the third act is infinitely better because it taps into the themes of not judging a book by its cover, and that not all mermaids are bad, just like how Grandmama says in the opening that not all Krakens are bad. But the movie didn't go anywhere near that route and it was just overall just disappointing to me. And I think that perfectly describes Ruby Gillman to me. Very underwhelming. So it doesn't surprise me that not only is this movie not doing well with critics, but also not doing pretty hot at the box office too. I mean, that is an understatement. This movie is floundering. Pun intended. But to be fair, this movie being mid is not solely to blame for this film's failure, because you cannot talk about this movie without talking about the marketing, or the lack thereof. Universal released the first trailer for this movie 3 months before it was supposed to come out. Not to mention that the trailer itself spoiled everything. There were no surprises going into this movie. And this is true of the entire marketing. You can click on a compilation of all the trailers and videos for this film and still get the basic outline for how this film is supposed to go, which is kinda sad. And this leads me to my conclusion for this video. I feel sorry for this movie, cause you can clearly see there is care and attention to detail within this film. The animators and artists were clearly trying to do the best with what they had, but it just didn't work out. Universal clearly sent this movie out to die. And while I could be mad at them, at the end of the day, they're also a business. And with this movie being in production for a very long time, changing names, plot lines, from as far back as 2017, Jesus. This movie was probably a headache behind the scenes and they just wanted to put it out there to get as much money as they could. Which won't be much, so... mission failed? Anyway, I'm tired. This movie is aggressively average, I expected very little, and I was still let down. I know there are people out there that really like this movie, and you know what? That's okay. More power to you. This movie just didn't do it for me, unfortunately. Again, if you disagree with my points or think they're vague or very unexplained, then critique me in the comments down below. I'm out. Peace.